In 1977, the incomparable polymath Steve Allen produced the first episode of Meaning of Minds for PBS. I immediately loved the show because it gathered historical figures from different eras and cultures around a table talk show style. They interacted with Steve and each other, asking questions, prodding, probing, expressing delight, dismay, and wonder at each other's ideas. The show, for me anyway, was ridiculously entertaining and mainly scripted from the historical figures' original words. Viewers surreptitiously learned not only history, but also about the lives and living conditions of the people who made it. The show made history itself and made it relevant by putting it in context. Parallels to past and current events were undeniable. Over the course of 24 episodes, we were invited into discussions with characters as recognizable as Aristotle and surprising as Sun Yat-sen, whose 3 principles of the people continues to influence both democratic and communist governments. Personally, I'd describe Yat-sen as probably a revolutionary mutualist. Anyway, in addition to the philosophies and ideologies the show wrangles with each episode, the series also reveals a fundamental question in the minds of philosophers, mystics, and people like you and me throughout the ages. When will the world change for the better? What is better is somewhat subjective, of course, but for our spiritual discussion today, let's agree that better is a big picture view of a world in which our institutional systems are primarily concerned with the equitable welfare of human beings instead of the acquisition of commerce and territory. Better is Jesus' vision of the realm of God, which obliterates our obsession with power and material wealth, allowing us to see clearly that our true calling is caring for each other. Everything else will fall into place, but now our focus is on building our world from the bottom up instead of the top down. Many philosophers on Meeting of Minds conclude that it is best for every aspect of society if the population is healthy and happy. And for the population to be healthy and happy, rulers and governments must provide individuals with the means to live their best for themselves and society. These great thinkers come to the same conclusions for different reasons, which in my book means the concept itself is pretty potent. So some support a society that meets people's needs merely because it's good for business. And this is proven true as epidemics and wars decimate the numbers available to work in factories, to teach, to nurse, or to work as doctors, police, builders. You get the picture. Others argue that humans are morally obligated, either through nature or because of an obligation to a god, to care first for those who cannot care for themselves. Either way, the discussion is about desiring a better world. When will the world be better is a question of particular concern for Paul and other Jesus followers long ago in Palestine. There is little scholarly debate that in the early days of the post-resurrection movement, Paul believed Jesus would return in short order, not only to answer the question of when things would be better, but to make the better world happen. When Jesus talks about the kingdom of heaven, better translated as realm of God, he's not talking about a happy, happy, joy place in the sky, but about a transformed world here and now. And Jesus expects us to be its creators, not him. And you shall do greater things, he says with hope in his voice. Paul takes up Jesus' mantle and encourages, cajoles, and outright lambasts his new churches into acting like the better world is already here. Of course, Paul is motivated because he firmly believed Jesus was going to return during his lifetime. And as time passed and Jesus didn't materialize, many new Jesus or Paul followers started backsliding to their old comfortable ways. Nothing is changing, they complained. Where is Jesus? They demanded. Their congregations were often reflections of the same pettiness found outside the church, filled with power plays for leadership, fights over the interpretation of the new letters about Jesus being passed around, and jockeying for position to find favor with God in the new age. This was particularly true in Corinth, a wealthy Roman colony and an important trading hub. Decades before, Julius Caesar had seeded the metropolis with merchants, freed slaves, and immigrants striving for upward mobility. Archaeological evidence shows the imperial Roman cult, Egyptian, Greek, Jewish, and other religious temples coexisted and thrived in Corinth. There were a lot of choices there for someone interested in religion. So, as Paul's new church in Corinth begins to lose faith and hope, he writes to them encouragingly. This is what I'm saying, brothers and sisters. The time has drawn short. From now on, those who have wives should be like people who don't have them. Those who are sad should be like people who aren't crying. Those who are happy should be like people who aren't happy. Those who buy something should be like people who don't have possessions. Those who use the world should be like people who aren't preoccupied with it, because this world in its present form is passing away. Even though it appears that nothing ever changes, this world in its present form is passing away. Paul believed that. Even as years went by without Jesus returning, Paul believed God was making things better through all the new believers in Jesus, whether that meant believing in his sacrifice on the cross, his call for social justice activists, his vision of an equitable world, or something else altogether. Paul reminded the Corinthians that they were doing a new thing because God was doing a new thing through them, as God does new things through all of us. It's hard, though, doing a new thing, and it was likely more daunting 2,000 years ago. I'm sure that as people joined the way of Jesus, friends who were still comfortable with the old ways wondered what the hell they were doing following crazy ex-zealot Paul and heretic Jew Jesus. As time passed, it's no surprise the Corinthians wondered how much longer they would have to survive the ostracizing, violence, and banishments. When will the world change for the better? Today, we have the advantage of a sound historical perspective. We can look back 2,000 years through hundreds of thousands of preserved ancient texts, countless archaeological digs, and anthropological discoveries that continue to reshape our view of the past. And miraculously, all this information is accessible to all of us all the time from anywhere on the planet, including all of those great episodes of Meeting of Minds. I think access to good history, even reenacted, makes the world a better place. From our 21st century perch, we should clearly see the world is exponentially better than it was. Sure, on the surface, not much seems to have changed. We still fight wars in the same parts of the world we were fighting 8,000 years ago. And despite all the philosophers, activists, teachers, and reasonable people encouraging us to care for and love one another through the ages, we disregard the welfare of the planet and her people. Still, far fewer people today die of diseases and war than at any time in human history. And despite food deserts and waste, billions of people today are more well-nourished than even 100 years ago. Millions more are educated, and literacy worldwide, while not great, is far better than it was 2,000 years ago. The world is already better, my friends. Is it still full of problems? Of course, but like Paul, I encourage us not to focus on the bad, but instead to remember how much better the world is. And realizing we've made some progress, remember that it takes thousands of people to continue the process, to effect the ultimate change for the better. And remember that you're one of them. Amen. Our discussion question today is, how do you stay encouraged about the future in a difficult present? How do you stay encouraged about the future in a difficult present? And I think today